What do you do when your husband's family won't come save his life, but they'll fight you in court for his dog and $100,000? My name is Charlotte, and this is the story of how I discovered that some people will choose wine over their dying son, but lose their minds over golden retriever inheritance money. Trust me, you need to hear what happened next. You know that feeling when everything's perfectly normal and then suddenly it's not? Like when you're brushing your teeth and your phone buzzes with a text that changes everything. That's how October 15th started for me. I'm Charlotte Lynn Whitaker, though. After what happened, I'm not sure about that last part anymore. I'm an ER nurse at Coastal General, which means I've seen every kind of emergency you can imagine. Heart attacks, car crashes, overdoses. I thought I knew what crisis looked like. I was wrong. It was supposed to be just another double shift. Rain hammering the Oregon coast like it was angry at something. The kind of night that keeps you busy in the ER because people do stupid things when the weather gets dramatic. But Nate was home safe and warm with Toby, our golden retriever, who thinks he's part human and part alarm system. Nate's an artist. Was an artist. Oil paintings, mostly seascapes that captured something raw about this place we called home. He'd spend hours in his studio with Toby, sprawled across the floor, both of them content in their own little world. That night, he was working on a commission. Something about storm clouds that I'll never see finished. Around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Nate. Chest hurts bad. Toby's barking nonstop. Something's wrong. My blood went cold. When you work in emergency medicine, you develop this sixth sense about danger. This wasn't Nate being dramatic. This was real. I called him immediately. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. That's when I did what any reasonable person would do. I called his parents, Margaret and Richard Whitaker. They lived 20 minutes away in their pristine McMansion overlooking the bay. They had cars, they had time, they had a son who needed help. The phone rang twice before Margaret picked up. I could hear laughter and clinking glasses in the background. Classical music. The sound of people having a very good time. Oh, Charlotte, hi? Is everything all right? Margaret, I need you to go check on Nate. He texted that his chest hurts and he's not answering his phone. I'm stuck at the hospital until morning. There was a pause. Not the kind of pause where someone's processing urgent information. The kind where they're calculating inconvenience. Oh dear, well, we can't really leave right now. We're hosting a wine tasting fundraiser for Brett's city council campaign. We have 40 people here, Charlotte. Important people. You understand? Important people, while her son was potentially dying alone. Margaret, this could be serious. Please. I'm sure he's fine, sweetheart. You know how Nate can be, a little dramatic sometimes. And that dog barks at everything. We'll check on him first thing tomorrow, okay? The line went dead. I stood there in the break room holding my phone, listening to the rain pound against the windows. Around me, the hospital hummed with its usual chaos. Ambulances arriving, monitors beeping, life and death decisions being made every minute. But 20 minutes away, my husband was alone. And the people who were supposed to love him unconditionally had just chosen a wine tasting over his life. I tried calling Nate 17 more times that night. Each ring felt like a countdown to something terrible. When my shift finally ended at 6 a.m., I drove home through empty streets, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I found him in his studio. Toby was lying across Nate's chest, whimpering. He'd been there all night trying to keep him warm, trying to bring him back with pure love and desperate hope. The painting Nate had been working on was still wet on the easel, storm clouds gathering over dark water. But he'd added something new in those final hours. A single streak of gold breaking through the darkness. Like he knew someone would need to find the light. They say muscle memory kicks in during a crisis. As a nurse, I'd performed CPR hundreds of times, but this was different. This was Nate. I dropped to my knees beside him, pushing Toby gently away. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. Check for pulse. Nothing. Again. And again. My hands were steady, my technique was perfect, but my heart was screaming. When the paramedics arrived, they took over with professional efficiency. I watched them work on my husband like I was floating above the scene, like this was happening to someone else. They called it at 7:23 a.m. Time of death. Just another statistic on a Tuesday morning. The next 48 hours exist in my memory like fragments of a broken mirror. Phone calls to make. Arrangements that felt impossible. People saying they were sorry, but their voices sounded like they were coming from underwater. The only real thing was Toby. He refused to leave Nate's studio. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink, just lay in the exact spot where he'd found Nate staring at the door like he was waiting for him to walk back in. I tried everything. His favorite treats. Coaxing, begging, nothing worked. Finally, I just lay down on the floor next to him. We stayed there together, two broken creatures who understood loss in ways that words couldn't touch. When I cried, he'd rest his head on my shoulder. When he whimpered, I'd stroke his golden fur and whisper that we'd figure this out together. That's where Margaret and Richard found us on Thursday afternoon. I heard the front door open without a knock, heard expensive shoes clicking across the hardwood. They appeared in the studio doorway like they owned the place, Margaret, clutching a Hermes bag, and Richard checking his Apple Watch. "Oh, Charlotte, you look terrible, sweetheart." "Thanks, Margaret." Really what I needed to hear. "We came to help with arrangements," Richard said, but his eyes were scanning the room, looking at Nate's paintings, probably calculating their value. "And we'll take Toby off your hands," Margaret added like she was doing me a favor. "This has to be so hard for you, and a big dog is just extra stress you don't need right now." I sat up slowly. Toby pressed closer to my side, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Toby's not going anywhere." Margaret's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Charlotte, be reasonable. Nate grew up with golden retrievers. It's a family breed. He'd want Toby with us, with people who understand these dogs." "You mean with people who wouldn't come when he was dying?" The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Richard cleared his throat. "We've already spoken to our vet, Dr. Morrison. He's expecting Toby this afternoon." "No. Charlotte, you're not thinking clearly. Grief makes people do irrational things. Toby belongs with family." That's when something cold and sharp crystallized in my chest. Family. These people who'd chosen wine and campaign donations over their son's life. Who'd shown up not to comfort his widow, but to claim his dog like he was an inheritance. "I am his family," I said quietly. "And Toby stays with me." Margaret's face went red. "We'll see about that. There are legal ways to handle this, you know. Nate had very specific wishes about his belongings." She was bluffing. Had to be. But something in her tone made my stomach clench. That night, after they'd left with threats hanging in the air like smoke, I sat in Nate's home office going through papers I'd never wanted to touch. Insurance documents, bank statements. And then, in a folder marked "Important," I found something that made my blood run cold. A will, dated just 6 months ago. My hand shook as I opened it, scanning through legal language that felt like a foreign dialect. Most of it was what you'd expect. The house, the savings, his paintings. All to me. But there on page 3 was a section I hadn't expected. A specific mention of Toby, and what it said wasn't what Margaret and Richard thought it said. It wasn't what I thought it said either. It was something that would change everything. The will was signed by Jonah Martinez, Nate's college roommate turned lawyer. I'd met him a few times at barbecues and gallery openings. Quiet guy with kind eyes who never seemed to fit with Nate's other friends. Now I understood why. I called him at 6 a.m. the next morning. "Charlotte, Jesus, I'm so sorry. I've been trying to figure out how to reach you." "Jonah, I found Nate's will. There's something about Toby that I don't understand. Can you come to my office today? There's more you need to see." His law firm occupied the second floor of a converted Victorian downtown. Nothing fancy, just honest work in an honest space. Jonah met me at the door looking like he hadn't slept either. "Before we go through the official documents," he said, "Nate left something else, an emergency letter. He called me Monday night, said he wasn't feeling right, and wanted to add a personal note to his file. He handed me an envelope with my name written in Nate's familiar scrawl. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the kind he used for sketching. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Char, it began. If you're reading this, something happened to me. I hope I'm wrong, but my chest has been tight for days, and I keep thinking about Dad's heart attack at 38. Toby belongs with you. He's always been more yours than mine anyway, the way he follows you around like you hung the moon. If anyone tries to take him, remind them they weren't there when I needed them. Love you both, Nate. The words blurred as tears hit the paper. Even facing his own death, Nate had been protecting us. There's more, Jonah said gently. The pet trust. He opened the official will to a section I'd skimmed past in my panic the night before. There it was in black and white legal language that somehow managed to capture Nate's voice. A trust fund of $97,000, set aside specifically for Toby's care, food vet bills, grooming boarding if needed, all managed solely by me with no outside interference allowed. But it was the final paragraph that took my breath away. If my parents or any family member attempts to claim custody of Toby or access to these funds, they forfeit any right to either. They know what they chose when it mattered most. If they show up for money or for my dog, don't give them either. They already chose what was important to them. He knew, I whispered. Nate was a lot smarter about people than he let on, Jonah said. He updated this will right after your wedding. Said he wanted to make sure you and Toby would never have to depend on anyone who might let you down. I stared at the document, seeing my husband's fierce protection written in legal terms. $97,000, almost $100,000 for a golden retriever's care. It was excessive. It was beautiful. It was exactly the kind of thing Nate would do. How did he even have this much? His paintings. 3 sold last year for more than he'd ever gotten before. He was finally making real money, Charlotte. And the first thing he did was set up protection for you and Toby. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Nate's love filling the small office. Then Jonah's phone rang. Martinez Law Firm. His face went tight as he listened. I see. Yes. She's here now. No, I don't think that's necessary, but if you insist. He hung up and looked at me with something like pity. That was Richard Whitaker's attorney. They're contesting the pet trust. They can do that. They're claiming you manipulated Nate into writing it. Undue influence. They say a grieving man wouldn't leave nearly $100,000 to a dog unless his wife pushed him into it. The room felt like it was spinning. That's insane. Nate loved Toby more than anything. I know that. You know that. But they're going to argue that no reasonable person leaves that kind of money to a pet. They're painting you as a gold digger who convinced a sick man to cut his family out of his inheritance. I thought about Margaret in her Hermes bag and Richard with his Apple Watch. People who drove luxury cars and lived in a house worth more than I'd make in 10 years. People who'd chosen a wine tasting over their dying son. And now they wanted to drag me through the court for money they didn't need to take a dog they'd never bothered to visit. What are our chances? Jonah was quiet for a long moment. The letter helps, a lot. It shows intent and sound mind. But pet trusts are still unusual enough that some judges get skeptical, and they have money. Good lawyers. This could get ugly, Charlotte. I looked down at Toby, who'd been lying quietly at my feet through the whole meeting. He looked up at me with those golden eyes that held nothing but trust and love. Then I guess it's going to get ugly. Because there was no way in hell I was letting them win. Small towns love gossip almost as much as they love taking sides. By Friday, everyone in Coastal Bay knew about the $100,000 dog trust. The story spread like wildfire through coffee shops and grocery store checkout lines. Did you hear about that nurse inherited almost $100,000 for a golden retriever? Must be nice to marry into money and get a dead man's dog as a bonus. Always knew there was something off about that girl. I stopped going to my usual coffee shop when the barista started giving me looks like I'd robbed a bank. Grocery shopping became an exercise in avoiding eye contact. Even at work, conversation stopped when I walked into rooms. But the worst part was social media. Nate's cousin Kylie, a 25-year-old wannabe influencer with 12,000 followers, decided to make me her personal project. She posted a photo of Toby from Nate's Facebook with the caption, "My cousin died and his wife is using his beloved dog for attention and money. This is what grief looks like when you're a gold digger." The comments were brutal. "Disgusting. No shame. Poor dog deserves better than this witch. She probably killed him for the insurance money, too." I wanted to respond, to defend myself, to scream the truth at these strangers who thought they knew my story. But Jonah advised against it. "Don't feed the trolls," he said. "Let's focus on the legal case." The legal case that was becoming a circus. Richard and Margaret's lawyer, a shark in an expensive suit named Bradley Kent, painted me as a manipulative opportunist who'd isolated Nate from his loving family. They claimed I'd convinced him to write the pet trust during a period of mental instability caused by his undiagnosed heart condition. "No rational person," Kent argued in our first hearing, "leaves nearly $100,000 to a dog. This is clearly the result of undue influence by a spouse who knew her husband was ill and vulnerable. But here's the thing about dogs. They don't lie. They don't perform for cameras or judges. They just react to what they know." Every time Margaret and Richard came to court, Toby's behavior changed. This gentle, loving golden retriever who'd never shown aggression to anyone would start growling the moment he saw them. Not barking, not playing. A low warning growl that made the fur on his neck stand up. During one particularly tense hearing, Richard tried to approach us during recess. "Here, boy," he called, crouching down with his arms open. "Come to Daddy." Toby pressed against my legs and let out a sound I'd never heard before. A deep, protective rumble that made everyone in the hallway stop and stare. Dr. Sarah Chen, our local veterinarian, agreed to testify as an expert witness. "Dogs are extremely intuitive about human emotions and relationships," she explained to the judge. "They form deep bonds with people who show them consistent love and care." Toby's reaction to the Whitakers suggests he doesn't associate them with positive experiences or safety. "But dogs can be trained to behave a certain way," Kent argued. "Mrs. Whitaker could have conditioned this animal to react negatively to my clients." Dr. Chen shook her head. "The behavior I've observed isn't trained, it's protective instinct. Toby sees Mrs. Whitaker as his pack leader, and the Whitakers as a threat to that pack. You can't fake that kind of bond." The trial dragged on for weeks. Character witnesses, financial experts, even a pet behaviorist flown in from Portland. The media attention grew. Local news picked up the story. Then, regional outlets. Suddenly, the $100,000 dog case was trending on social media. Kylie started a GoFundMe called Justice for Nate's Family. It raised $300. Meanwhile, I got messages of support from strangers. Widows who understood, pet lovers who got it, nurses who knew what it meant to fight for something that mattered. But I was losing. I could see it in the judge's face. The pet trust was too unusual, too much money, too easy to question. That's when I remembered the voicemail. I was going through Nate's phone one last time looking for anything that might help our case when I found it. A voicemail I'd left him that terrible night. But before my message, there was something else. A pocket dial. 3 minutes and 47 seconds of Nate's voice recorded accidentally when his phone called me back during his heart attack. I almost deleted it. Who wants to hear their husband dying? But then I heard something that stopped my heart. Nate's voice, weak and wheezing, talking to Toby in the darkness. "Good boy. Stay with me, buddy. Charlotte's gonna take care of you, okay? If I don't make it, you stay with her. You're part of her now. Not them. Never them." A pause, labored breathing. "She loves you almost as much as I do." Almost. Another pause. Then so quiet I almost missed it. "Tell her I'm sorry I couldn't wait." The voicemail that would change everything. The recording that would prove once and for all that Nate's final thoughts weren't about money, or wills, or legal documents. They were about love, about protection, about making sure the two souls he loved most would have each other when he was gone. In his final moments alone and afraid, Nate had made his choice crystal clear. And this time, everyone would hear it. The courtroom was silent when I played the voicemail. You could hear Nate's labored breathing through the speakers, his whispered words to Toby, the raw love in his voice even as he was dying. Judge Patricia Morrison, a tough woman who'd seen every kind of family drama, wiped her eyes. In 30 years on the bench, she said, "I've never heard anything more convincing than a man's final words to his dog. The pet trust stands. Mr. Whitaker made his wishes crystal clear, not just in legal documents, but in his last moments of life." Margaret shot out of her seat. "This is ridiculous. It's just a dog." "Ma'am," Judge Morrison said quietly, "sit down. Your son didn't think it was just a dog. And frankly, neither do I." The ruling was final. The trust was valid. Toby was mine legally and morally. Richard and Margaret were cut out completely. No access to the funds, no visitation rights, nothing. They left the courthouse without looking back. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 3 months later, Kylie launched her masterpiece of delusion, a new GoFundMe called Wronged Family Seeks Justice. Help us fight back against Gold Digger. The description was pure fiction. How I'd isolated Nate from his loving family. How I'd manipulated a sick man for money. How poor Toby was being held prisoner by a woman who didn't really love him. She shared it across every social media platform, tagged local news outlets, even created a hashtag, #OurJusticeForNate. At first, I was devastated. Here we go again, I thought. More lies, more accusations, more people who'd never met me deciding I was evil. But then I remembered something Nate used to say about his art. Sometimes you have to show people the truth so clearly they can't look away. So I made my own post. I uploaded the voicemail, all 3 minutes and 47 seconds of it. Nate's voice weak but determined, telling Toby he belonged with me. His final, "I love you," whispered into the darkness. I wrote one simple caption. This is what Nate really wanted. These are his actual last words. You decide who's telling the truth. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The video went viral within hours, millions of views, thousands of shares. The comment section became a tsunami of support. I'm sobbing. This is what real love sounds like. Anyone who fights this is heartless. That man's final gift was protecting his wife and dog. As a widow, I felt every word of this. She's living his love every day. Nurses from around the country shared their own stories of loss and healing. Pet owners talked about the bonds that transcend everything else. Strangers sent donations, not because I asked, but because they understood what this really meant. Kylie's GoFundMe was reported so many times that the platform shut it down. Her follower count plummeted. The hashtag she'd created became a symbol of support for me instead of her. But the most beautiful thing happened a week later. I was at the hospital visiting Mrs. Patterson, whose husband had just passed from cancer. She was inconsolable, sitting beside his empty bed, not knowing how to say goodbye. I knocked softly. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm Charlotte, one of the nurses. I brought someone I thought might help." Toby padded into the room like he belonged there. He went straight to her, rested his golden head on her lap, and just stayed. She buried her face in his fur and cried like she needed to. "He knows," she whispered. "He knows exactly how this feels." That's when I realized what Nate had really given us. Not just money for Toby's care, but purpose. Toby became a certified therapy dog, accompanying me on visits to grieving families. He comforts people in their darkest moments because he survived his own. We volunteer at the Children's Hospital now. Toby lets scared kids practice giving shots on his stuffed animal twin. He sits with parents keeping vigil in ICU waiting rooms. He shows up where love is needed most. Margaret and Richard never tried to contact us again. I heard through mutual friends that they moved to Florida. Richard's city council campaign failed spectacularly once word got out about how they'd treated their dying son. Kylie still posts occasionally, but her influence dried up. Turns out, people don't follow someone who attacks widows and dogs for attention. The money from Nate's trust, most of it sits untouched. Toby's expenses are minimal. His food vet bills his therapy dog certification and gear. But I'm saving the rest for something Nate would have loved, an art scholarship. For kids who lose parents young. Because sometimes the best way to honor someone's memory is to help other people find their light in the darkness. Every night, Toby and I sit in Nate's studio. The painting he never finished still sits on the easel, that single streak of gold breaking through storm clouds. I've thought about having someone complete it, but I think I like it this way. Unfinished doesn't mean broken. Sometimes it means there's still room for hope. They came for our dog thinking we were weak. They found out we were exactly as strong as the man who protected us both, even from beyond the grave. And you know what? We're doing just fine without them. If you've ever lost someone and had to fight for what they left behind from people who didn't deserve it, you're not alone. Love wins, but sometimes you have to fight for it. Drop a paw print in the comments if you've got a story like ours. I read every single one, and Toby sends his love to all the good humans who understand what really matters. Some battles are worth fighting, some love is worth protecting, and some dogs are worth $100,000 and every single fight that comes with it.